before I went to university, I was driving for Sündab, the German motorbike company. If you don't really care about the food, if you are in the Rally Dakar, your body gets weak and you can't be at your best and you will not win. With Le Mans, you have one chance a year, that's it. And if you fail, it's another year. They did a brilliant choice in getting back in Formula One with Red Bull. The fuel gets lighter, but the car gets hotter, and you can't prepare the car for the ultimate lap. And what I've seen with George, that he gets better and better the higher the pressure gets. Floor doesn't give you the performance. You have to understand the whole system of the car, and that makes it so difficult, but also so exciting.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Strippin' the Dippin'. And if you were expecting to hear a beautiful, sultry Caribbean voice like AMG Den's, well, you're not going to get that one today because I am Dr. Obbs, and I am your resident tech doctor back for another episode with a very, very special guest today. I have to say, I'm a little nervous. This is my first team principal that I will be speaking with, but today we are joined by former Williams CEO of Williams Racing and team principal, Jost Capito. How are you, Jost?
Yeah, hi, Dr. Obbs. I'm fine, thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be in your podcast, and I'm looking forward to talking with you about what I've done in the past. And I hope it's interesting for the listeners.
Absolutely, Jost. I have to say, as I was preparing for this podcast today, I was looking through your motorsport lineage, your history, and it's probably one of the most extensive ones that I've seen. So there is definitely a lot to talk about today. And I think the listeners are going to be very interested to hear those stories and also hear what you've been up to. So let's jump right into it.
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So I guess the first question, Jost, for you, before we really get into, your engineering degree and all the places that you've worked, is what first started the motorsports passion for you? How did you first catch the bug? Because everybody I speak with that is really passionate about motorsports can point to one time where they say, yep, that's where I caught the bug. Where did it start for you?
That's an interesting question because I believe it started before I was born, and that sounds quite stupid. But when my mother was pregnant with me, my parents went to the tourist trophy on the Isle of Man, and I must have heard the noises of the motorbikes racing, even having not seen it. But it must have put the virus into me before I was born. So. So it must be like this because I can't remember a time when I was not really into racing. My father founded with two friends the local motorsports club, and he supported the local riders. And I remember since I was the age of 3, I was going to races with him and supporting the drivers and helping out. So it's all my life, really.
Wow, that's a fantastic story, and I completely believe in this because even myself, when my mother was pregnant with me, I sat through her dissertation for her PhD as an industrial engineer, and I ended up being an engineer as well. So I believe in this. I think it's completely true. So along that engineering path, you found yourself at the Technische Universitat Munchen, at the Technical University of Munich, where you received your mechanical engineering degree. So what kind of pushed you towards mechanical engineering as opposed to some of the other disciplines?
I was in racing since my early childhood, and I started racing at the age of 16. I had my first race on the 16th birthday. It was a Sunday, and I got my driving license in the morning at 3 o'clock at the police station, and I started the first race at 8. So And then it was a motorbike enduro race. So I raced enduro and motocross. And before I went to university, I was driving for Sündab, the German motorbike company that was very active in enduro at that time. I think the company has been sold later to China, and I think they produce still motorbikes under the name of Sündab in China. And because Sündab was in Munich, that was one reason to go to Munich, as I raced for them, to be close to the factory, close to the mechanics, and help to develop the bikes. And also, I was always a big fan of Paul Rocher, who was the head of engine motorsport, BMW motorsport engine development, and he was in charge of the Formula One engines, the former Formula Two engines, and I wanted to work for him. I said, this, as BMW is in Munich, I said I have to go to Munich. And also the Technical University in Munich was, I think it's still, but at that time definitely it was one of the best technical universities in the world. And I wanted to go there, and I was lucky and happy that I could achieve that and studying in Munich.
And that's a great segue into the next thing I wanted to ask you about. Was that I had read somewhere that you started maybe when you were in your undergrad working for BMW, as you said, and you were working in the powertrains division on the M3 and the M5s. Is that correct?
Yeah, then I pushed hard and tried hard to get my diploma work at BMW Motorsport. As I thought, okay, if I do a good job there, I have a chance that they employ me, and my dream to work for Paul Rocher comes true. And if not, at least I have done the diploma work there, and the M engines were, say, the best engines at that time globally. And I say, if I have worked on these engines in my diploma work, I have a good chance to get the job somewhere else as well. So, and then I got the diploma work at BMW Motorsport, and it was on the gas exchange of the 4-cylinder 4-valve engine that was the prototypes for the first M3 engines. And I really enjoyed that, and that was great work. I got straight into the department, could work with everybody there, and yeah, was a great step into BMW.
That's great. And so would you say that your biggest area of interest when it comes to motorsports or race cars is the powertrains, is the engine side of things?
Yeah, and initially it was, but then then I had to get into everything else, and I got more interested in the motorsport management and what motorsport is and what makes motorsport. And that came largely through my experience with racing the Paris-Dakar in the 80s. So we did have the family team in the 80s where we raced the Paris-Dakar, and I won the truck category with my father in 85. And so I've done it from 83 to 86 4 times. And when you're a small team in the Rally Paris-Dakar at that time, you had to do every single job that is in racing. You had to do on your own. It was the planning, the admin, the entries, the finding the sponsors, preparing the car, and then during the race to make sure that you had the food, was navigating, was driving, was being the mechanic, being the engineer, and every single job that is in racing, you had to do yourself. I think with that, I really appreciated all the various efforts in racing. And I found that every job has to be done excellent and the best to get the best result. So if you don't really care about the food, if you are in the Rally Dakar, your body gets weak and you can't be at your best and you will not win. And if your admin isn't right, if you take and waste too much time at the borders, you will not win. If you have a problem in the car and you don't fix it immediately when you find it, you will not win the rally. And I think with that gave me the huge experience of all various jobs that are in racing, and also make me appreciate all these jobs. And that helped me largely in my career in racing.
I would say to build your expertise, your experience level through Paris Dakar is really something there. I mean, talk about, a race where you have to be on the edge of performance, reliability, robustness, the whole team effort. It's amazing. It's incredible. I would say you definitely learn absolutely a lot around that, but probably made when you then moved into Porsche to work in the racing division in the 80s, probably running Carrera and the Supercup series look like child's play almost, because the Paris Dakar is so complicated maybe in comparison to some of those things. But as I was reading a bit into your time in Porsche with the racing division, I was quite interested to see that you were also involved in 1990 manager for Porsche Le Mans, where you won with the Dauer 962. I believe that's similar to the Group C Porsche 962. Is that correct?
The car was based on the Group C 962, but there was the GT1 category was very new. Was the first year in '94, and as at Porsche we wanted to race the GT1, as we have seen. I believe that this is the future of sports car racing. And you needed a road homologation for the car, and then we see that Dauer has done the road homologation for the 962. So we helped him to finish the road homologation, get the car on the road, and with that road homologation, we could do then the GT1s and enter 2 GT1s based on the 962 in Le Mans. Of course, it was then not original, like the 962 Group C, because you had then different tire regulations, weight regulation, and so on. So we didn't believe we would be capable of winning the overall, but being the first winner of the GT1 category. But I think then it went so well that finally we could beat the Toyota and won the overall Le Mans in '94. What was a great experience, and saying a huge day in my career.
That's amazing. And it's very timely because, as you know, we just had Le Mans just this past weekend. And actually, we saw Ferrari win Le Mans for the first time in 58 years. So maybe you can speak on the achievement.
It's great to see the sports car racing coming back like this, with manufacturers getting in. And I've followed it on the TV and seen the enthusiasm. And I read that there was 375,000 spectators over the weekend in Le Mans. This is fantastic to see this category coming back.
Absolutely. And so maybe you can also speak to how hard it is to win at Le Mans, because when, as an outsider looking in, as watching it for many years, I see it as sort of this fast, chaos filled, 24 hours where you're just waiting for the next thing to come up and troubleshoot that way to just keep going and keep surviving. What is it like to win Le Mans, and how hard is it?
Yeah, I think it's very much like my belief for all racing, that you win races at home and not at the racetrack. So if you come with a car that is capable of winning, then the race team can make it win. If you come to the race with a car that is not capable of winning, the best race team can't make it win. And that it's very much so in Le Mans. It's a lot of preparation that goes into Le Mans, a lot of pre-testing, a lot of 24-hour runs at that time, at least. There was not that much simulation in the 90s, so you really had to go testing. And it was a huge program to go testing to make sure that every single problem that occurred during testing got solved. And then you get still additional problems in the race, because you can test and prepare as much as hard as you want. It's never as hard as the racing itself. And then we were so well prepared that we could solve all the problems. And we had a fantastic team. The Porsche factory team was, I think, always in history. It was one of the best or even the best racing teams around the globe. And especially they meant so many times they won the Group C in Le Mans, and then going with the GT1 based on the Group C. The team was just outstanding and was really fighting, and we were determined to win. And when we've seen that we have the chance against the Group C Toyotas, then I think everybody was alerted and worked at its very best. And it's so great if you win it and if you achieve it. And it's just a couple of seconds where you're really proud for yourself and for the team and enjoy that. And I think that's worthwhile all the hard work for over a year, just enjoying these couple of seconds.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So much work going into 24 hours. And, if you have some sort of unfortunate incident during a race and then you end up putting it in the wall, it must feel like such a letdown, I could imagine. And previously, we actually had a former Red Bull Racing performance engineer, Blake Hinsey, on the podcast. And we talked a bit about that. We talked a bit about how much work goes into pre-race preparation, performance engineering, and then also in between free practice sessions and things like that. I imagine that Le Mans is quite extensive with that as well.
Yeah, it's a lot of dyno testing, and it's a lot of running on racetracks. And the test is not a 2-3 hour test. You have to run the car 24 plus hours every time, and this is very hard for all the team, as you're not swapping people around in these 24 hours. So you are fully alerted. And when the team goes to the Le Mans, to the actual race, they have done a lot of 24-hour preparations, and it's really focusing the whole year on that one race. And then it's all or nothing, isn't it? If you are in a race series, if it's Formula One, it's World Rally Championship, whatever, if you lose one, the next one is a week or 2 weeks later, and you can improve, you can prove yourself again. With Le Mans, you have one chance a year, that's it. And if you fail, it's another year. And then you don't have lots of chances to win.
That's amazing. That's why, I could definitely feel the joy and the excitement from the Ferrari team as they won Le Mans this year, not just 58 years, but you could tell all the pre-race preparation, all the work that went into the design and the build of that car to get it to that point. I felt their joy for sure.
Yeah, it's also if you don't win, if you struggle, if like the Toyota guys, I think they also deserved and were really looking forward to win the 24 hours of Le Mans. And then you see, you have for one team, you have the glory, you have the excitement, you have the win. But there are most of the teams, everybody beside one, they are really disappointed, and they worked so hard for 1 year and then didn't get what they really wanted to achieve and didn't win, and see that they have to work even harder and better for next year and come back. I think that makes really the spirit of racing. It is, if you lose, you fight even harder, you want to come back, you try again. And you have to be in mind, in racing, you have more bad days than good days, and then you really have to enjoy the good days. But the hard days, they make you better, they make you work even harder, they make you more focused, and you still have to be so determined. And most of the guys who are in racing, then they don't give up. You lose one time, you lose 2 times, 3 times, and you still fight for winning once, and you never give up. I think that for me attracts most in racing, is that, yeah, you don't win, but you fight even harder, and you get more motivation out of not winning to really get this day and get these couple of seconds of enjoyment and pride when you then win. That's, for me, is what makes motorsport so very special.
Absolutely. Pain is a great motivator, especially if you're able to take that pain and turn it into positive energy. So let's fast forward a little bit to 1996. You joined Sauber, the F1 team, and from 1998 to 2001, you were the COO of RedBull Sauber. So just maybe for some of our listeners who aren't brushed up on their history, RedBull Sauber started in 95 with Dietrich Mateschitz throwing his hat into the Formula One ring, and you can really see how far Red Bull has come, right? From that time when they were just a sponsor, to then in 2004 being a full racing team after the purchase of the Jaguar racing team. And unfortunately, last year we lost Dietrich, and it was a very sad time, I think, for all of motorsports. Across the different disciplines, he had such an impact, and I'm sure you probably had some interactions with him along.
Yeah, I had quite a lot of interactions with him. It was, one of my best friends from racing motocross and enduro is Heinz Kinnegartner, the Austrian who has been motocross world champion, and he was the first motorsport guy being sponsored and partnered with Red Bull. So I had this link into Red Bull from a very early age and seen what they have done, seeing that the good friend is supported by Red Bull and was the first guy. And then when I went to Sauber, then Red Bull bought into the team during the time I was there. I started there in 96 to build up the commercial company, RedBull Sauber Engineering, that was localized just beside the Formula One team. So I had the relations with the guys there. As Max Welti, who was my boss at Porsche as a motorsport director, he went to Sauber where he was before as well, and he convinced me to join Sauber Petronas Engineering and build up the commercial engineering department or company. And then in 98, the Formula One team, they did an external study and to find out what they have to do to become more competitive in Formula One. And the result was that the team has to develop, from a traditional race team into an engineering and process-driven engineering company. And then, as I just said, was in charge of building up the Sauber Petronas Engineering. Then they asked me if I would like to implement this process and change the team as a COO to get better performing in Formula One. And I think that was a great challenge.
Yeah, and a challenge that was definitely helped out by the signing of young Iceman Kimi Räikkönen, who in 2001 helped the team to get to 4th in the constructor standings. What was it like having Kimi Räikkönen on the race team? Fiery guy.
Yeah, it was. At Sauber in 2000, we were looking for, who we had to replace Alesi and who we want, and we looked into Jensen Button at that time, but he has signed at Renault at the time we were there. And Jensen's manager said that he's got a young Finn who is really good and we should look into. He gave me the name and I did some research in the magazines, and I found out that he won kart races in the wet with slick tires because the family couldn't afford wet tires. And I've seen what he followed him in his couple of Formula 3 races he had done. Was not many, was only I think 4 or 5 when talked to him. And we invited him to Hinwil. And I think from the first time I met him, looking into his eyes and seeing his determination, it was clear that we said, I want this guy to race for Sauber. And it was then quite hard to convince Peter. Peter then first offered him a test contract because he didn't have lots of experience. And he was 19 years old at that time, and he said, Peter, I'm not a test driver, I'm a race driver. If I can't race in Formula One, I prefer racing and continue in Formula Renault or Formula 3. and that was a guy who has the chance to become a test driver in Formula One just says no with the age of 19. And wow. I think all his behavior and his determination and his self-belief was so impressive that I said, okay, yeah, we go for him. And I think it was rightly so. And he did fantastic right from the beginning, from the first time he got in the car. He was extremely impressive.
Yeah, I think drivers like Kimi, Max Verstappen, I mean, you know, Lewis Hamilton, the amount of self-confidence that these drivers have in their abilities is just something you must it must be in their DNA, I imagine. I mean, to drive on the edge of control like they do and feel confident that you can handle anything that comes your way must just be something all the greats have, I would imagine.
Yeah, they are very special characters and very special people, and so driven for success. It was really great to work with these kind of people. Is absolutely stunning.
That's fantastic. So then, you know, in 2001, you moved into a role with Ford Motor Company, and I believe I read somewhere that you were involved somewhat with the F-150 Raptor and the Mustang Shelby GT500. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. Because I went to Ford of Europe, and I think Martin Leach, who was at that time the vice president for R&D in Ford of Europe, he we had to talk, and he wanted me for the job to bring back the performance models for Ford, so the STs and RS. And Martin was a former kart driver, and then because of back problem he couldn't, but he was racing against Senna, and he was really fast, and he was a motorsport guy, so we were on the same, had the same spirit, had the same thoughts, the same ideas, and very quickly we became friends as well and worked so well together at Ford. And we created the ST models, the Focus RS, and then after that, you know, again, he made me, in addition, the motorsport director for Ford of Europe. Before, when we had huge success in WRC, where we won the manufacturers championship 2006 and 7, and it was also winning it after 27 years for Ford again in 2006. And then the next step in Ford was going to the US and become the global head of the global performance vehicles. And that then included all the STs and RS models that were based in Europe, but also the vehicles that were developed at SVT. So at that time was the stage to finally develop the F-150 Raptor and also the Mustang Shelby GT500 that it's always developed with SVT and what it's now Ford Performance. So that was really a great time.
I would imagine. I am actually a Ford fan. At some point in my life, when I was a young kid tinkering with cars, I had a '96 Mustang Cobra SVT, and that was definitely fun
Nice.
to drive around. It was probably a little too fast for the age that I was, definitely, but I enjoyed it immensely. So as we know, you know, in the news, there's recently Ford is joining with Red Bull for 2026. You know, Red Bull will be developing their own engine, but they'll have a relationship. Hopefully, it's more than just a monetary relationship. I believe Ford is going to be bringing some technology from the electric vehicle side potentially into the hybrid systems. What are your thoughts on that partnership between Ford and Red Bull for 2026?
I think that's fantastic, isn't it? It's a great opportunity for Ford. And when I was in the US, I worked with Jim Farley. He was vice president for marketing and sales, and I was director SVT. So we had quite some interaction. And I was also in charge of global motorsport business development for Ford. And there I worked closely with Jim as well. So knowing him from there, I could imagine that he picks up that opportunity, as this is a brilliant opportunity for Ford to get back in Formula One. And also the guys I worked with in racing, some of those are still there, and still we became friends and we're still in touch. So they are so motivated, and I think Ford will be a great partner for Red Bull. And I'm absolutely convinced it will be a very successful project. As Ford is a great company where I always loved working for Ford. We're great people, and it's a global company with global attitude and global culture as well. It's a fantastic company, it's a fantastic team, and it was really great to work there. And Jim Farley is a fantastic guy. He's just a motorsport enthusiast, but he also sees the business behind it and the opportunities he has. So he did a brilliant choice in getting back in Formula One with Red Bull.
Absolutely. It really feels like a match made in heaven. And I would say that, maybe for some of our listeners who again aren't so keyed into the history of Formula One, the Cosworth engine, the Ford Cosworth engine was a big part of Formula One racing history. So it's great to have Ford back into Formula One. I was, kind of hoping that at some point, we might get this merging of, the old Ford engines and the Red Bull powertrain engines, but let's see what the future brings.
Yeah, and it's when I was the early years at Ford, when I started being motorsport director for Ford, I was in charge of the engine program for the Jordan team. So I worked with Eddie Jordan as he had the Cosworth engine, and Cosworth belonged to Ford. So I was in charge of that program. And then, now the Red Bull team was originally the Stewart team and then the Jaguar team. And what was my time at Ford as well. And when the Ford guys talked to me that they would be willing to sell the team, and if, as I know Mateschitz, if he would be interested, I did the first call to Mateschitz and said the team is available and if he would be interested. So when you see that the whole story comes then back, working for Cosworth, the Formula One engine, with Eddie Jordan, and then finally being involved in Red Bull acquiring the Jaguar Formula One team is quite nice to look back and see the success they are having now.
Wow, yes, I did not know that story. That's incredible. I myself am a Red Bull racing fan, so I can say that I got a chance to talk to someone who actually was one of the ones to get the Red Bull racing team on the radar for Dietrich Mateschitz from Jaguar side. That's really a fantastic story. Wow. So
it was interesting times, and to see that it works then out in that way is just very, very nice to see. Even if later I've been the competitor to them, but it's still to being a competitor, you have to respect your competitors and you can be friends with your competitors. But when the flag drops, then you are fighting and you want to beat them, but you still can be friends. And I think this is the attitude you have to have in racing.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you mentioned previously about your time with Volkswagen with World Rally Cross. So this is a great chance for us to step into that phase of your career. So from 2012 to 2016, you led 3 World Rally Championships during those 4 years. Four. Oh wow! Apologies.
No problem.
So for some of our listeners who maybe, most of our listeners are into Formula One, but I think World Rallycross is something that is just fast. Really, if you're into motorsports, I mean, to see the amount of skill that the drivers have, and as an engineer, to think about the amount of engineering that goes into a car like that, to be able to handle a multitude of different racing conditions, environments, but also be robust enough to survive an entire race distance as well as perform at a high level. What goes into being a world champion rallycross team? I mean, what does it take to get there?
Yeah, we're talking about World Rally, not Rallycross. Rallycross is different. And we can come to Rallycross because I've been involved in that as well right from the beginning. But for rallying, the Rally World Championship is when I was at Volkswagen and at Ford, it was 12 to 14 rallies a year all over the world. And the rallies take a week. You have first the recce, so the drivers can on the Tuesday, Wednesday, they can drive through the stages where the time is counting and taken. You can drive twice through that. So to learn the stages, and the co-drivers write down their notebook, their road book. And And then it's a 3-day rally. It starts Friday, Saturday, Sunday mornings around 6 o'clock and finishes around midnight every day, and Sunday in the afternoon. So, and this is action packed from nearly 24/7 for 3 to 5 days. And it's not like you have an hour practice and then finally you have the race in 2 hours. You have a race over 3 days where you have to be alerted, work on the car. The mechanics have only a certain time to work on the car, and the mechanics are really a part of the competition. And we could change the gearbox in less than 11 minutes on that car in service.
Wow. Wow.
And the car has to be designed for that. The mechanics have to practice it, because that can be winning or losing a rally. And the spectators can come into the service park and get very close to the cars. And when the mechanics finish everything in time and don't get a penalty, then they get standing ovations by the spectators. And that makes the mechanics the stars in rallying, because they are part of the competition. And they have to do a brilliant job being extremely fast and being extremely determined to succeed in rallying. And that gives also a very close relationship with the mechanics, the engineers, and the drivers. So it's for me, this is the most exciting motorsport.
It sounds very exciting. And as an engineer myself, it's fascinating to think about all the things that have to go into a design to make sure that it's not only, as we talked about, reliable, but you can actually disassemble and reassemble it quite quickly. There's a lot of engineering that goes into something like that. So that's really fascinating.
And everybody interested in racing and motorsport, I would recommend go and watch a World Rally Championship event for a weekend and get this experience. Go out on the stages in the forest, watch the cars driving, then go in the service park, see the work. And it's a 3-day experience that I really would recommend every motorsport enthusiast to go and see.
I actually remember when I was living in Germany, there were some broadcasts, I believe it was of rallying, where they were doing courses through these small German villages, it seemed like, and maybe Dutch villages as well. It seemed quite interesting to me.
Yeah, no, it's the German rally, the rally that has been in the World Rally Championship was around Trier, so in the southwest, and went mainly through the vineyards. And it was amazing to see the cars racing through the vineyards. It was just unbelievable.
That's incredible. So then, after your time with Volkswagen, you went for a short period of time to McLaren Racing, and you got to work for Ron Dennis. And Ron Dennis is is someone that's incredibly well known. Different opinions over his demeanor over the course of his career, but the one thing that cannot be stated enough was his role in the growth of McLaren, not only the portfolio of in their regular automobile line, but also obviously in the Formula One team. And the success that he had just from, I believe it was from when he started to then in 4 years, from 1980 to 2009, becoming a top tier team. What is it about Ron Dennis? I imagine you got a chance to really know him and speak to him quite a bit. What makes him so special? What is it about a great leader to turn around a team like McLaren?
Yeah, when I got approached from for the CEO job at Williams, then of course at first I couldn't really believe it. That was so far out what I could ever imagine. And I've been a McLaren fan since I was a child, and I admired Ron. And for Ron approaching me personally and want me as the CEO to run his team was something I needed a couple of days to sink in that this is really true. And then we had the discussions, and I met him a couple of times, and it took quite a while to discuss. As you can imagine with Ron, he wants to know all the details. He wants to be 100% sure that he gets the right person to run his team or for any job. And we created a really good relationship. And as I admired him with I've seen he is very focused, very detailed, and very determined. And I created a really good, friendly relationship with him, and it was so great to work with him. Even it was only 3 months, but I learned so much in before I started the job, in negotiating with him, discussing with him the future of the team, where he wants to take it, and then working with him was a fantastic experience I would not want to miss.
And so this is a great time to transition to that role with Williams. I think for some of the newer Formula One racing fans, they'll probably recognize you the most from that time that you spent with Williams. So let's camp out here for a bit. So I'm going to take you back to August 2021 at the Belgium Grand Prix in Spa, and it was quite a wet weekend. And
Yes.
And qualifying was very interesting. I remember from Q1 to Q2, just so many teams and on the intermediate tires, and I believe even in Q3 at one point people were on the full wets at one point. But George Russell was on it the whole time through qualifying, Q1, Q2, Q3. I mean, this wasn't some sort of a fluke Q3 incident. He was in the top 10 through Q1, Q2, and then in Q3, he's P2 and only beat out at the very last run as it hit zeros by Max Verstappen. And then as we go on to the race, again, a rain-soaked Sunday, a couple laps behind the safety car, and P2. What was that like for the team? What was that experience like that weekend?
But this is again a moment like winning Le Mans, isn't it? That when you have a car that is really not competitive and you make it on the podium, and a lot of people said, yeah, you didn't really deserve it. There was no race, and but the way how the team could manage to get on P2 was not by luck. It was by I can tell you the story as the official weather forecast was that it starts raining in the last couple of minutes before the end of Q3. And our weather information that I really trusted was that it will start a minute or two after Q3. So if you believe the rain starts before the end of the qualifying, you go out with quite a high amount of fuel. You go do a fast lap, a slow lap again, prepare for another fast lap, because the track gets faster and faster until it really starts to rain. But with that strategy, if you believe it starts raining before the end of the qualifying, you have to do this. But the tires get slightly slower from lap to lap. The fuel gets lighter, but the car gets hotter, and you can't prepare the car for the ultimate lap. And as we believe in our weather forecast that it will rain just after Q3, we stayed in the garage, and people said, we got messages, are you stupid? Everybody's out, you're in the garage. And then we prepared really for this final lap, believing that it will not rain according to the data we had. And then we could go out, prepare the tires rightly for one lap, having the lowest amount of fuel, the car being perfectly prepared. And that made George being focused on that lap, and he did an outstanding job as well, getting the P2 in qualifying. And I think this strategy, how the team believed in the data we had, this commitment that everybody gave in that fast and this last lap really made us deserve the podium. And then the podium for the team was like something we've never expected, and it really welded the team again so much together, that was a big part of building the future for Williams to be successful again.
Absolutely. And so I know a few who work or have worked for Williams in the past, and something that they've all told me is that feeling like it's a family. And you can't help but think back to Frank and everything that he instilled. And I know the Williams family is not involved like they used to be in the past, but you have to think that kind of that that feeling of family, and you know, it's great to hear you speak about that, Jost, from that weekend, because you could see it. You know, you could see it on everybody's faces as you all celebrated, that it really meant something and that everybody came together. And it's fascinating to understand how that happened. I did not know that story, but that really is, you know, a stroke of genius by the team there. That's fascinating.
And that is where I say the family feeling within Williams is still there, and the spirit of Frank is still within the team, and that's what was also for the new owners, and for me it was very important that the name is not changing. Yeah, I believe the name should never change, and it keeps Frank's spirit, and the spirit keeps the team together as well. And everybody working at Williams is still very proud to work for Williams. And many say still we work for Frank, and you feel his spirit everywhere in the company, and this makes the team very, very special.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about George Russell as well. You know, you mentioned his lap and the job that he did there in Q3. I watched that on board many times after it happened, and he was on the edge of control. But you know, George Russell is someone that you know, when he had that coming together with Valtteri as well, I think I saw that fire in him. You know, after that, but you know, now George is, you know, he left Williams, you know, while you were with the team there, and he went to Mercedes. What kind of driver is George Russell? What is Mercedes getting in George Russell? And people say he can be a future world champion. What could make him?
Yeah, I believe he will be future world champion and multiple world champion. I'm fully convinced. First, he's a fantastic character. He is very smart. He is very determined. He is a team builder. He can motivate the team. He can work with the team. He listens, but he also is forcing if he wants something. He's very outspoken, and his driving capabilities are absolutely fantastic. And you see that in Spa, where you know he can always get another 1, 2, or 3 tenths out if what the car can't give really. Yeah, let's say the car can do this lap time, he can get the lap out that is faster than the lap time the car is capable of delivering. And special there where you see this is the one lap, we took the risk on the weather because we believed in it, and he knew this is his chance. The pressure for him is really, really high there. And what I've seen with George, that he gets better and better the higher the pressure gets. I think this is what really makes an excellent race driver, that the pressure makes him getting better and not weaker. And he really enjoys that pressure and then delivering. And he's such a, and if you've seen then him after Spa or when he got points, the emotions that he has, he's able to show his emotions, and he gets his emotions out, and that is so important for the whole team. Yeah, that he is not the cool guy when he gets out. And for this P2 he cried, and he went to the team and he cried with everybody. It's just such a guy who knows why he could be so successful there, as the team did everything for him to do that. And he gets the team behind him. Everybody in the team wants him to be successful. And, you know, the mechanics, the engineers, they don't work for the team principle, or I say they officially work for, but they don't give everything or more than 100% for the team principle or for a CEO or whatever. They only give it if they love the driver and want to give it for the driver, because the driver can show the performance on the track. And this is a huge part of a really good race driver, to get his guys or girls working more than 100% for him because they want him to be successful. And he is extremely good in that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we've had a few other discussions with, you know, Lindsay from Red Bull Racing, and one of the things he mentioned about, you know, whether it was Alex Albon at the time or Max Verstappen, you know, just the relationship that the drivers have with the team, the on-track race team, not just the team principal, but everybody, stopping in the factory as well and saying hi to people. It just really makes the team want to work that much harder for that driver, because they know that driver's invested. That driver's not only invested in the car and the performance, but also invested in them and as a team as well.
Yeah, this is so important. And I think everyone who's really successful does it and has this capability.
Absolutely. So in 2022, I think it was an interesting time, I'm sure, in your career with Williams, because you were part of one of the biggest regulation changes maybe ever in Formula One. It was a complete reset of the aerodynamic regulations. There was also a change to the fuel, ethanol that was in the fuel, which affected the performance of the engines, the ICEs. But in 2022, we got the biggest change, which was the update to the aero packaging of the car. 44 was released in 2022, and it came out with a very interesting side pod design. I remember it, maybe the limelight was stolen a little bit by Mercedes, who came out with no pod, but Williams had a very small side pod. It wasn't quite the no pod, but it was aggressively downwashing. And I was especially keen to see that, as someone that loves aerodynamics. But then in June 2022, you shifted the design and went away from the kind of mini pod design you had and more of a Red Bull style downwashing design. And people have talked quite a bit, whether it was Aston Martin and, they made their move and their change to kind of the downwashing design, which they then adopted further or developed further. But people talk about copying designs, and I really don't like to refer to it as that. I talk about design convergence, because I think this is a natural part of performance engineering. But how do you assess a design? When you see different designs on the grid, you see different things that other teams are doing. How do you assess what could work, what you want to try, and what elements you might want to put in the car?
That's an interesting question. And as we talked before, you're an expert in fluid dynamics. and I studied fluid dynamics during my engineering degree, so we know a bit about it. And I think the phase to decide which strategy and which concept you go with a complete new regulation is really exciting. You got again the opportunity to get downforce through the floor. What was the idea of the regulation? To get less downforce through the rear wings, make the rear wings smaller, so that the dirty air is behind the car is not that bad, that it makes it possible again for cars to follow each other closely and improve overtaking. But then you have to evaluate and do a lot of CFD work and wind tunnel work with different concepts. So what gives you the best package? Is the best package to focus on the floor and to get the maximum downforce through the floor? Or do you still focus to get the maximum downforce through focusing on the rear wing, or everything in the middle? And when we've seen, it was really exciting to see the different solutions that came out in 22 with no team knowing what any of the other teams is doing. And that is quite so. Nobody knew anything about the other team, and then coming with different solutions that are still very close in competitiveness. And then of course the purposing hit, and the cars with the solution to focus really on the floor. Then you have to have a very low ride height, and like we couldn't run the ride height on the tracks that would have maximized the performance of the car, because then you got into that purposing, and I think that was other teams as well. And then when I think it's copying is the wrong word, it is part of the competition that you watch what competition is doing, and you have to assess when say there is a car like the Red Bull is that overperforming over the others. You have to analyze and try to get the maximum information through photos and to analyze what it means. But it's not just, and you understand that the aerodynamics is so complex on the car. As long as you don't have the full car and everything and the understanding and the know-how why it works, then you just can't copy. And you have to understand, if you do change to the car, you have to understand what it means and how this change works with all your other aerodynamic means you have on the car. And there are more than 250. So it's not copying. You can see there is a different concept, but then even to change the concept is a very tricky and difficult situation, what you see with Mercedes as well. Because if you start with the concept and change the concept, you start very much from scratch. And where the other team who has that concept is already 2 or 3 years into that and understands it fully. So then to copy or go with change the concept and to get then as competitive as the team who ran with that concept right from the beginning and evolved it already a lot is an unbelievable difficult task.
Yeah, Jost, I'm glad you said it, because I've been saying this for for some weeks now, especially after Monaco, where we had really a veritable buffet of floor images that we got to see, which, as you mentioned, the bulk of the downforce is coming from the floors, and the floors are your IP, and you want to protect that at all costs. And in Monaco, the marshals were gracious enough to lift every car up in the air so we could see all of the floors. And we got a chance to see the RB19 floor. And in 2022, we also got to see, after Checo put it in the wall, we got to see their floor. And something that people have been talking about is, well, why can't you just take, the Red Bull floor and put it on the Williams, for instance? And it's just as you said, Jost. The car it's a veritable symphony, and there are notes and there are tempos of the aerodynamics from front to back, the front wing setting up the flow for the rest of the car, which then cascades over the side pod to the rear end of the car, where you're generating downforce and extracting, power from the floor itself. You simply cannot take one aspect of a team's car and just strap it on and then all of a sudden be fast. So I'm so happy to hear you say that, because I've been saying that for some weeks now, and I get very excited when we dynamics.
Yeah, that's why the teams are not too worried about that the other teams see the floor. Of course, they try to avoid that, but just seeing the floor, it doesn't give you the performance. You have to understand the whole system of the car, and that makes it so difficult, but also so exciting. Yeah. And it's Absolutely. Exactly as you said. But you have to look at your competition. You have to understand what they are doing, why they are doing it. You have to analyze this. This is part of competition, isn't it? And it would be stupid not doing this and not looking to competition. I think that's in every sport. It's like this. Yeah, you have to know what your competitors are doing and analyzing why, and then try to get better for yourself.
Yeah, ganz genau, as we say in German, Jost. It's you're exactly correct. I love to see Adrian Newey on the grid exploring with his and looking at other competitors' cars. And just recently, Red Bull had made a change to the corner of their diffuser, where they added it's almost like a bulge in the corner of their diffuser. And this is actually something that Williams had done originally, and then Mercedes then adopted it. So it's not just only looking at the teams that are, say, at the top of the grid, but it's looking across the entire grid and seeing, hey, what's interesting on their car that we can potentially use, and we might be able to observe if it gives us any gains.
Yeah, but you see Adrian Newey, as you mentioned, he's not leaning back as they have the fastest car. He is walking on the grid up and down and really looks in all the single details the other cars have, and then tries to understand why have they done this change. And then if he understands, then they go and try to implement that into their system of the car. But they first try to understand what it means and why, and then understand if it would evolve their car, and then go and do it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I've got some more questions here. I'm really appreciative of your time, Jost. So you, in 2022 as well, after you lost George Russell, you signed Alex Albon, and Alex Albon had, taken a year sabbatical, after leaving Red Bull, and it turned out to be a very inspired signing as well. Magic about Spa, Jost. P10 with Alex Albon in Spa in 2022, and just seems to be a track that you all understood quite well, I guess. But at the time, there was some speculation as well. When you were looking into who you might sign, that there was a driver linked with Mercedes, and either it was going to be Van Dorn or De Vries, which we now see De Vries on the grid with Alpha Tauri. Can you tell us about that selection process? You talked about the selection process of choosing the Iceman back in the day, but what was it like in the new era of Formula One, choosing a driver like Alex Albon, and what do you look at in how they can say improve the culture of your team? You talked about the family atmosphere. What into it?
I think that it's a very complex decision process to look for a driver, because I very much believe that the driver has to fit to the team and to the situation the team is in. Yeah. So as Williams was still at the back and will take a couple of years to get really competitive, as there is a lot to do. You need a driver who is willing to fight and give it all for a team that it's not in the lead. But you need a driver as a team at Williams who has, if you want to bring the team forward, you need a driver with experience, and you need a driver that is respected by the engineers and can influence the engineers, and you need a driver who is really hungry. And when we've seen that all these attitudes were best fitted to Alex, as he raced for Alpha Tauri and for Red Bull, so he had the experience of a top team. He understood how the top team works, the processes. Then he had a year off, and he knew that if he gets another chance, that he has to grab it with both hands, because it's very unlikely you get a third chance. So he had to prove himself. That he was very grateful to get the seat again. And also from the personality, he is really a person, again, with very similar to George, from the team building, influencing the team, making the team work for him. And also George and him are very good friends, and George was very, let's say, positive talking about him, and also was supporting the discussions with Alex. And when I first talked to him and said, okay, yeah, he seems to be the right guy for the team, and with everything where he went through and what he had done, I think he would be the right choice for Williams in the situation Williams was in 22 and still is. And I believe it has proven that it was a really good choice. I think also De Vries is an excellent driver. And I built through 21, I built a really good relationship with him. And it was hard for me to tell him, you will not get the seat, because I really like him as well. I really like his character. He's different to Alex, but he can achieve exactly the same. And what he showed when he got in the car for Alex in Monza is his first ever Formula One race, was really unbelievable. And but he didn't have the experience of a Formula One team in 21 that Alex has had for the 22 season. But he, I think he's a very capable driver, and in the moment it's not working well for him at Alpha Tauri, but he's much better than the results he's showing right now.
Yeah, I think that's something that personally am going to watch as the year goes on. De Vries's performance, in the Williams when Alex wasn't there was fascinating. It was just the talk of the weekend, and to see his tough run of form so far with AlphaTauri is interesting. But it is very much the car and the driver need to be matched together, into really a harmonious kind of an atmosphere there. So it
it's
doesn't
great
seem
to
to be
see
working.
getting better race by race. Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
really the last races were really encouraging. So I'm sure by the end of the season he will be highly competitive and he will get the maximum out of the car. I'm absolutely convinced.
Yeah, let's hope so. I think so as well. So now you have left Williams, and now James Vowles is in your former seat there. Did you have a chance to get to know James a little bit before you left, and what sort of a challenge is ahead of James as he looks to bring Williams back to the front?
No, the last 2 years, and when I was at Williams, as being the engine customer for Mercedes, of course, I had lots of discussions nearly every race with James, and we really liked working with each other and having discussions about also strategies about the future of Formula One and so on. So he's a really capable guy. It's very intelligent, and I believe he's the right choice to be team principal for Williams. As I wanted to do that for 2 years, and then said, okay, when the base is laid, then we need younger people who stay there for a long time and can then build on the bases. As it's always very difficult to start and put the base in place. That can go wrong. And if you put a young guy in there, then it can really damage and hurt his career. And that's what I also didn't want. This is why I said, okay, I go for 2 years, do the base, and then a young guy can take over and can learn from that. And we had discussion before he started, and I gave him my input, and we talked from time to time. We talked in Miami, and he was really appreciative that we had this discussion, that he didn't have to start from zero and get in not knowing what to expect, that he had that, and that was the basis for him to work on. So, and I think he's doing a brilliant job with the team.
Yeah, that's a really great story as well. I didn't know the background to how that developed over the course of those 2 years that you were at Williams, but I am quite impressed with James, from his time, with Mercedes, but also obviously, and just the things that he's saying, and the way that he's not only engaging with the fans and being very open and communicative as well as to where they are and what they're planning to do, but it seems like he's a dynamic leader as well, which is, and I can obviously tell yourself, Jost, that you both are sort of cut from that same cloth. You seem to have a very unique leadership style in the way that you motivate and lead people. And so I think he's certainly the right man as well for Williams for these next few years.
Yeah,
so
I absolutely believe that too.
Yeah. So now moving into last few questions. These are more general F1 related questions, and I'm ready to dive aerodynamic weeds with you a little bit, Jost. So, we talked about the aero regulations from 2022, and this year there's been some discussions about this dirty downforce and the things that or that maybe it's the wake is starting to grow a bit, and some drivers are complaining that it's getting harder to follow again. Mm-hmm. From your time at Williams, in 2022, with the updated cars, with the ability to follow closer, in your opinion, are these aero regulations the right step forward for Formula One? Are they working? What's your opinion on that?
I believe it was the right step and was the right way, because it was easier and still is easier to follow than it was before. But I think it's also a natural development. The more aero efficient the cars become, the worse is the air behind the cars again, because that goes hand in hand. Yeah. And that's why you need, from time to time, you need new regulations and get changed again, so that you get more variation and get back to bases again. And that's where now the discussions are really up within the F1 Commission and the technical directors, how the regulation for 26 look, because that's the next point when the regulations will change on the engine and on the car side.
That's right. And if if the rumors are to be believed, then 2026 might actually bring adaptive or active aerodynamics, which could be very interesting to see if they do find a way to implement that in Formula One. As we all know, DRS is a form of active aerodynamics, but it's a form of drag reduction but active aerodynamics be help with braking or things like that is a very interesting thought as we look forward to 2026. So one of the big changes in 2021 that you were also part of was the cost cap and the implementation of the cost cap. And there's been a few up and down years of the cost cap. My team Red Bull had an adventure through the cost cap era themselves. But the aim of the cost cap was really to prevent these bigger teams like Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull that have much bigger budgets from simply just running away from the competition in a development war. I think we've certainly seen teams have to be smarter with their updates. They have to be, we've seen a lot of modularity of design this year, which is fantastic. You see that teams are finding ways to modulate the design of the rear wings so they can change them from race to race without having to change the complete assembly and have common use components, which is really fascinating. But in your opinion, it's taken some time for some of the backmarker teams to still catch up even with the cost cap. Is the cost cap working? Is there something that needs to change with the cost cap to bring the teams closer together?
I think basically the cost cap was absolutely needed, and I believe Formula One would have been a huge risk in general without the cost cap, because the gap between the smaller teams and the bigger teams was getting bigger and bigger. Yeah, the cost cap puts everybody on the same maximum spending, but not every of the small teams has the budget to invest to the limit of the cost cap. So, to utilize the cost cap, you have to have the money to spend up to the cost cap. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there is a discussion now, and I brought this discussion up last year. It's with the cost cap, you freeze the gap if you don't do anything else. Yeah. So if you live in a castle and the other guy is living in a hut, and then you equalize the budget, the guy still has the castle and the other guy is still in the hut. Yeah?
That's true.
Yeah, and if you say you can only have 3 bathrooms, the guy who has 10 goes down to 3, and the guy who has none and can't invest because there is no gap in the cost cap, he will still not have a bathroom, or he might get 1. So what I believe that there should be a list of infrastructure that a Formula One team should have, and the teams who don't have that should have the ability above the cost cap to get to this standard of facility, because otherwise you just freeze the gap. Yeah, and if you want the small teams to catch up, you have to give them the chance to catch up. Yeah, but that is I think that's a difficult and long discussion, as the teams who have the big infrastructure don't want the other teams to catch up, and there are also teams, even if they would have the allowance to catch up, they don't have the resources to catch up because their budgets are not that big. Right. So it's a very tricky and difficult discussion. And if it takes a while to equalize the teams through the cost cap, but to say then the cost cap is wrong would be very, very wrong, because I believe the cost cap made Formula One survive and growing.
That's right. Yeah, Jost, you're right. It's much more nuanced than just the cost cap only. It's something that James also talked about as well from the Williams side of things, with the level of facilities and things, the upgrades that need to happen. It's also something that you see with Aston Martin, for instance, with Lawrence Stroll injecting the money that he has into that team, and they're able to now, they've got a massive new building and a wind tunnel. I think Red Bull only recently is upgrading their wind tunnel from the World War II wind tunnel they've been using for quite some time. So there is definitely an infrastructure piece there. And, I also look at how some of the profits from, Formula One, Liberty Media, are shared across the teams. And could there be any opportunity for maybe some weighted sharing, for some of the teams that don't have this opportunity, maybe to drum up some of the sponsorship and the, revenue into the team have access to? Potentially might be some opportunities to also fund some of the lower teams on the grid to bring up the facilities. As you mentioned, there should be a common expectation of a bare minimum of facilities, and these facilities are what's needed. That we need to find a way to make sure that the other teams have access to that.
Exactly. Yeah. And that would be, and I'm sure this discussion is kicked off. The discussion is taken on now with other teams as well, and I'm sure that we'll succeed to get this, but it's not like a one meeting discussion and then it is sorted. But it's going in the right direction.
That's right. So if anybody from Formula One is listening and wants to employ either Jost or myself, Dr._Obbs, you can reach out to us and we'll be sure to help you out.
No. I'm happy with my retirement.
Yes. So one last question, and then we'll get on to that. We'll get on to what you've been up to, Jost. I'm interested to hear. So last question is about Red Bull. So, this year we've seen Red Bull again be, a dominant force so far. The year is still young, but the RB19 looks, to be in a very competitive place where it may be set to shatter some of the records that the RB18 set. But they do have one big hurdle in the way, and that, is back to the reference of the cost cap and the, the exceeding of the cost cap that they did, that they're operating now under a reduced aero development limitation during the year. So in your opinion, how might this hurt them? Would this be something that would hurt them in 2023? Or is this something that's potentially going to hurt them for the 2024 car development?
I wouldn't say hurting, because I believe they are very efficient in using the wind tunnel. And, if you say you have the wind tunnel time, it depends how you use your wind tunnel time. If you have a huge infrastructure around it, the best technology and the best measurement methods and laser cameras and all that, you can use your wind tunnel much more efficient. Yeah. And if you can use it more efficient, you can do more tests in less time than others who don't have this efficient work and efficient opportunity for running the wind tunnels. So I think they will have an impact on their development speed, but not on their quality, I believe, because they are using the wind tunnel so efficient. I think the gap will maybe get a bit smaller, but will not disappear.
Yeah, it's a good point, because something that we've heard, teams across the grid talking about is that, efficiency of development, ensuring that the developments that you're bringing have gone through, proper levels of CFD assessment and, in the computational space before then going to the wind tunnel and then going to the track. And actually something interesting that I've heard is that, some teams, with reduced wind tunnel time potentially might be using free practice time after they've gone through and they've developed something in CFD to run prototype parts in FP1 and to get real on-track performance data, and potentially even skip some of the wind tunnel time. That maybe also another efficient way to gain data as well.
Yeah, there is a huge effort with all the teams to get the correlation between CFD, wind tunnel, simulator, and track.
Yeah.
This is vital under the cost cap, because if you have a good correlation, and when you see in CFD it's improving, and this finally really improves the car on track, then you are working very efficient. If you don't have this correlation, then you are not sure that you get the car that you believe a part that you believe improves the car. When you put it on the car, you can have the surprise that it's the other way around. And that's why all the teams have to invest a lot and have to work hard to get this correlation right.
It's so interesting that something like a correlation, I think maybe people that don't dig into the details, the technical side of aero development might not understand that everything that you do in computational space is based off of mathematical equations and relationships that utilize assumptions. And sometimes those assumptions aren't 100% correlated with reality. And so finding that correlation through, correlation factors and things like that is absolutely essential. And what you're doing in the computational space may not always reflect reality, unfortunately, as Mercedes found out through 2022 for most of it, with their issues with correlation with the W13, and even in their new updated Mercedes, where it seems like if anything, they've at least achieved a higher level potentially of correlation. That in itself is very powerful, as you mentioned, Jost. Yeah. So that's a really good point. So yeah, Jost, I feel like I could talk to you for hours. This has been a fascinating conversation, but I do want to get on to what you've been up to now since you've left Williams. You say you're retiring. How have you been spending your days? What things are you interested in? How are you getting on?
Yeah, first there is a lot of things that have not been done over the last decades that should have been done. For example, all the personal files that have been moving with me for 30 years, now they have to be sorted out and throw some away and look what you have to keep and whatnot. And I got approached by a couple of companies, startups. They asked me if I could support them, and it's not in racing, but it's quite interesting. One is an AI company from Australia. Another is a company who does autonomous last mile delivery vehicles. It's quite, this autonomous driving is quite interesting and quite really interesting and upcoming technology. And also another company who is developing safety boxes for lithium-ion batteries, what is getting more and more issues on fires. And you say, like in big cities, you're not allowed to get your battery of your e-scooter or your e-bike anymore in the apartment. You have more and more batteries on yachts, and if there is a fire on the yacht through the lithium-ion battery, it's very dangerous. So that's really a safety issue, and it's very interesting to work with these kind of companies. And they're all small companies with less than 10 people, but very efficient, very high technology. And I really enjoy working with them and focusing on engineering solutions.
That's great to hear, Jost. I think once you're an engineer and you've worked at the level of technical, the height of innovation of Formula One, I think that's the thing that initially drew myself into Formula One, was the innovation. In my personal career, I'm in technology development, and to see the level of innovation and technology development there is in Formula One, it makes sense that you're spending your time as well in very innovative areas like AI, battery, securing batteries and battery boxes and things like that. So that's fantastic to hear. Are you getting to spend any time doing any hobbies or anything as well? I think I've read that you're, and you did say that you're, as a young child, you were into motorbike racing. Are you getting to do any of that lately?
Yeah, I go on the motorbikes. So I love to ride all kind of motorbikes, and now I can go on longer trips. And that's what I'm preparing for, to really enjoy the riding as long as I can. And that's great. And I also get approached by companies who want me as a keynote speaker and talking about building and maintaining high performance organizations. What is very nice as well, and to to meet with people who are fascinated about how Formula One and racing in general works. And they're also interesting to see how that can impact and what are the relations to other businesses, and how other businesses can learn from the racing business in changing the culture and changing their approaches. And so it's really interesting, and it's quite a nice balance on engineering, on management style, management processes. And so it's really, really interesting. And now you can do most of it remote, like we do the podcast that you can do from all over the world. So you can combine, or I can combine these activities with traveling and riding the motorbike. So it's another perfect step for me in my career, I would say.
Yeah, the company that I work for actually went and spent some time with RedBull to learn a bit more about how they do their process, their processes for engineering, innovation, and development. So you're absolutely right. There's a lot of things that can be transferred over. And if someone wanted to get in touch with you, about speaking engagements and things like that, what's the best way that they can get in touch with you? Is it your LinkedIn page?
Yeah, the best is over the LinkedIn page. If you look for my name, you'll find the LinkedIn page, and I look at the mails there I get and the messages I get, so that's the easiest.
Great. Okay, Jost, I'm hoping that you get an opportunity on your motorbike to go on one of these glorious countryside long trips that they take in Germany. As living there for nearly 4 years, it is one of the most beautiful countries to drive through. And I hope you get an opportunity to do more of that. And I've really enjoyed my time with you, Jost. Thank you for being so open and, answering our questions here today, and for meeting with us. And it really was a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Obbs. It was really nice to talk to you as well. And you had really good questions that get a lot out of me, because it's obvious that you have a passion about it, that you have the know-how and the knowledge about Formula One and about racing. So it's always nice to talk to people who understand what the racing industry is doing. And I'm sure the listeners will enjoy this podcast. And I'm very much looking forward to feedback as well.
Thank you so much, Jost. And thank you everyone for listening to Georgie Strippin' the Dippin'. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe for future episodes. Thank you, Jost, and everybody have a wonderful evening.
I have a question to ask from Jost.
Oh, yeah. Go for it.
What do you think about pineapple on pizza? Yay or nay?
What? Sorry?
Pineapple on pizza. Ananas on pizza.
I need to be in a very special mood to like it.
There's 2.5% Italian in me, Georgie. The rest is Greek and Turkish. And I tell you, the 2.5% of me cringe when you talk about pineapple on pizza.
I'm pretty sure Denzel and F1 Black will be very happy to hear you guys saying no for pineapple on pizza.